All right, folks, welcome in. Stefan Kreisnik here covering Mississippi State for the Clarion-Ledger, joined by our Ole Miss writer, David Eckert, talking about the big game. Happy Thanksgiving week, but happy Egg Bowl week as well to those who celebrate. David, your first Egg Bowl experience this year. Are you looking forward to it, man?
Yeah, I cannot wait for whatever chaos is going to ensue because I know one thing, and that it will not be normal. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
No, it never is. And last year's game, the 31-21 win for Ole Miss, it kind of felt like the most normal game that there's been in recent Egg Bowl history. But at the same time, it's a game that featured some big plays, some big drop touchdowns for Mississippi State. Obviously the success that Ole Miss and that offense had with Matt Corral, later in the game last year. But completely revamped roster for Ole Miss this year, and it's been a successful year. Obviously. Earlier in the year, it seemed like maybe Ole Miss would be, in playoff contention, and that loss against Alabama maybe put that out of the picture. But overall, still a really successful third season for Lane Kiffin and his staff at Ole Miss, and we'll see what happens in the weeks and the months to come with Lane and the Auburn job, and obviously the smoke that's around that. But for now, how important of a game is this for Ole Miss? To go with Lane to go 3-0 in the Egg Bowl and have a chance to make Mike Leach and Mississippi State be 0-3 in the last three.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, right? I mean, beyond the fact that it's the Egg Bowl, and that makes it huge in and of itself. But, I mean, 10 wins is still on the table for Ole Miss. They haven't done that since, I think, the 50s. They haven't had a coach start 3-0 in the Egg Bowl in decades as well. So um, there are some milestones here on the table for them. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Obviously, kind of the inverse, right? Mike Leach hasn't won one of these bad boys yet. How hot is the heat, I guess, for from Mississippi State fans who want to see him get that done?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of heat. I think not just, the lack of success he's had in the Egg Bowl, but success comparatively, being hired at the same time as Lane Kiffin, and you have Lane, on the verge of back-to-back 10-win seasons with Ole Miss, and meanwhile at Mississippi State, they're going on back-to-back 7-win seasons. And obviously, at a program like Mississippi State, I mean, they haven't had back-to-back 7-win seasons since I think it was 2017, 2018 season. But at the same time, the expectations were high for Mississippi State coming into the season just because of how many returning players they had. And on the flip side, Ole Miss, with all the roster movement and the transfer portal, how much they had to utilize the transfer portal, it felt like a year where Mississippi State should have had the leg up on Ole Miss. And now you're coming into this Egg Bowl, regardless of what happens, you probably say that Ole Miss has had a better season thus far. But you can change that conversation a lot with a win. And for Mike Leach, I think it's huge. I mean, being 0-3 in the Egg Bowl, not many coaches get to see a fourth Egg Bowl after losing the first three. I think Mike Leach will be back next season. I don't expect him to get fired regardless of this result, but it makes the seat a bit warmer going into next year, and the expectations a bit higher because Mississippi State again should return a decent amount of talent. But at the same time, if you're 0-3 in the Egg Bowl, you have back-to-back seasons where you didn't necessarily make a jump, and if you don't make that jump next year and then you go 0-4 in the Egg Bowl, you definitely won't be around to see a fifth one. And on top of which, back when he was at Washington State, he didn't have a lot of success against Washington. I think he was 1-7 in the Apple Cup or something close to that. If you're 1-7 in that rivalry, you come in here, you're 0-3 in this rivalry. That's going to make a lot of people in Mississippi unhappy. So let's talk a bit about, specifically, on the field, what the product will look like in this game. Ole Miss and Mississippi State, two completely different offenses, right? Ole Miss likes to run the ball, move quick. Mississippi State, in the air raid offense, they like to throw it 50, 60 times a game. Even though when they have had success, it's because they were able to run the ball. How do you think this air raid offense matches up against the defense that Ole Miss will be throwing out there?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? Because one of the strengths of the Ole Miss defense is its pass rush, and obviously that's kind of line of defense number one if you're talking about shutting down a team that likes to throw the ball as you make the quarterback uncomfortable. So if they're able to do that, I think that's probably plan A. Ole Miss doesn't have, I think Jared Ivey is their sack leader off the top of my head, but they've got several guys who can get in the backfield and make that happen. So, I think that's probably the key. They are athletic in the secondary, but I think that's probably what they need to do in order to slow down that air raid offense. I guess,
I will say this too about that Ole Miss, defense. They were able to put a lot of pressure on State last year too with Sam Williams, obviously, and the success he had in the second half of that game. It feels like Ole Miss almost kind of unlocked the formula for slowing down the air raid this year because teams have kind of given up on the drop eight. They know that Will Rogers is smart enough to beat the drop eight. So, teams like Kentucky and Alabama this year, and they've kind of changed the formula. They've loaded the box and brought pressure and said, hey, we'll trust our corners to be one-on-one or on an island for a bit if it means getting pressure on Will Rogers. So I think Ole Miss kind of unlocked that a bit last year with the success they had. And as you mentioned there, I mean, the pass rush this year, if it can succeed, I should say, it'll have a lot of success against Mike Leach in this offense.
yeah, no doubt. I guess the other thing, right, is conversely, you know, you mentioned it a little bit. Ole Miss is an offense. Obviously, the Lane Kiffin style is very up tempo. They want to snap the ball quickly. They want to run. They want to limit, the opposition's ability to make substitutions. And then obviously the run game for Ole Miss has been the bread and butter with Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans, both not only guys that have handled a ton of volume, but they're very efficient as well. That's just been, maybe the best thing about this Ole Miss team this season is that duo. I'm curious from the Mississippi State perspective, how do you expect them to counter that defensively?
Yeah, this is a really tough matchup, based on what we've seen from Mississippi State's defense this year, because I don't think they've done a strong enough job early in games utilizing substitutions in the first place. I think, they've had opportunities in some games to maybe get some of those younger guys, your second string guys, maybe even your third string guys in, along the defensive line early in games so that you can save guys like Cam Young and, now Jaden Crumity back in the mix after missing most of the season with injury. You have some guys that maybe you can save their energy a bit in the first half and then really have them full go in the second half. I think we've kind of seen the inverse where Mississippi State's defense has been really good in the first half. They've been getting, some success and some pressure in the backfield in the first half, and you get to the second half, and now your guys are exhausted and you're not having as much success. That's kind of a bad formula for how this Ole Miss team runs because they're not going to let you substitute, and you're going to find yourself, throughout the entire game playing most of the same guys if you don't, pick and choose your spots of when you can sneak a guy in or sneak a substitution in. So it'll be interesting. I think, Mississippi State's run defense has been, iffy at times this year. The best run defense for Mississippi State has felt like it's been its offense. When the offense comes out hot and has a hot start and forces the other team to get away from the run game a bit, that's given Mississippi State some success because they can kind of, drop back a bit and focus on the pass defense that they need. I don't think they'll be able to do that against Ole Miss. I mean, I'd be surprised. I think Mississippi State could jump out to a 7-0 lead, maybe a 10-0 lead, but I'd be surprised if that was a big enough lead to make Ole Miss get away from its run offense. I think Ole Miss will run the ball as much as they can unless they're down 21-0 and it's the fourth quarter or something along those lines. So Mississippi State's run defense will need to be better, and it starts up front. It starts with the guys in the middle there. And we'll see how many opportunities they have to substitute. And I think that's an opportunity where, if Ole Miss's offense maybe struggles a bit in the first half, Lane Kiffin can stay to that running game, knowing that, Mississippi State in the second half has struggled a bit, with fatigue and things along those lines. So it's a tough matchup for Mississippi State. And I think this Ole Miss team is good. I think this Mississippi State team, when it's playing at its best, is really good too. So it sets up for an exciting Egg Bowl, one with a lot of implications off the field. And obviously always strong implications on the field. We'll both be in Oxford for that game. So until then, make sure you keep up with our coverage at the Clarion-Ledger, and we'll talk to you soon.